I thought family betrayal was just something I read about on Reddit until my own sister relegated me to sitting behind a stone pillar at her wedding reception. While everyone else celebrated at beautifully decorated tables, I was hidden away like a dirty secret. The stranger who took my hand that night changed everything. He was not just any guest, he was her future father-in-law's business partner. What he whispered in my ear about my sister's wedding funding made my blood run cold. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this wild family revenge story that literally changed my entire life, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below and smash that like button if you have ever felt invisible at a family event. Make sure to subscribe because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory, and trust me, you will want to see how karma comes full circle. Now let me tell you how one humiliating night led to the most satisfying revenge of my life. My name is Scarlett, and I had always been the overlooked middle child in the Morrison family. My older sister Victoria was the golden child, beautiful, successful, and according to our parents, destined for greatness. When she announced her engagement to Marcus Wellington, the son of a prominent real estate mogul, our parents acted like she had won the lottery. The wedding preparations consumed our family for 8 months. Victoria demanded perfection in every detail, from the imported Italian flowers to the custom Vera Wang dress that cost more than my annual salary as a nonprofit coordinator. I offered to help multiple times, suggesting I could handle the invitations or coordinate with vendors, but Victoria dismissed me with a wave of her manicured hand. "Scarlett, sweetie, this needs to be perfect. I cannot risk having amateur hour mess up my special day," she said during one particularly brutal family dinner. Our parents laughed it off as typical Victoria behavior, but her words cut deep. The seating chart incident happened 3 weeks before the wedding. I discovered my placement accidentally when I walked into the venue during the final walkthrough. There, tucked behind a massive stone pillar that blocked the view of the entire ceremony and reception area, was a small table for one with my name card. "Victoria, there must be some mistake," I said, holding up the card. "This table is completely hidden." She barely glanced up from her tablet where she was reviewing the final details. "Oh, that. Well, we had some last-minute additions to the guest list. Important business connections of Marcus's family. We needed to accommodate them at the prime tables. But I am your sister. And you will still be there, just in a more intimate setting. Some people actually prefer quieter spots." Her tone was dismissive, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. Our mother emerged from behind the floral arrangements, having overheard our conversation. "Scarlett, do not make a scene. Victoria has worked so hard on this wedding. Surely you can understand that business relationships are important for their future." That night, I called my best friend Maya, sobbing into the phone about the humiliation. "She stuck me behind a pillar, Maya, like I am some embarrassing relative they have to hide. This is beyond cruel, even for Victoria. Have you considered not going?" The thought had crossed my mind, but skipping my only sister's wedding would create family drama that would last for years. I decided to attend, but mentally prepared myself for an evening of feeling invisible. The wedding day arrived with typical Victoria fanfare. The ceremony was held at the exclusive Rosewood Country Club with 300 guests in attendance. I wore a simple navy dress I had owned for years, knowing that any attempt to outshine the bride would result in family warfare. As predicted, I was escorted to my solitary table behind the pillar once the reception began. The marble column was enormous, completely blocking my view of the head table where my family sat. I could hear the speeches and laughter, but I might as well have been in another room. That was when Robert Wellington approached my table. Marcus's father was a distinguished man in his 60s, known for his business acumen and substantial wealth. He rarely spoke to family members beyond pleasantries, so I was surprised when he pulled up a chair next to me. "Miss Morrison, I believe we met briefly during the engagement party. I am Robert Wellington." "Of course, Mr. Wellington. Congratulations on gaining such a lovely daughter-in-law." I tried to keep my voice steady despite feeling mortified about my seating situation. He glanced around at his pillar, taking in my isolated position, then back at me with a thoughtful expression. "Tell me, what is your profession, Scarlett?" "I coordinate programs for underprivileged youth at the Downtown Community Center. We focus on educational support and job training." His eyebrows raised with genuine interest. "Admirable work. And how long have you been in nonprofit management? For the next 20 minutes, Robert asked detailed questions about my work, my educational background, and my future goals. His attention was completely focused on our conversation, which felt surreal given my family's typical treatment of me. Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice. Scarlett, I need to share something troubling that I discovered recently. It concerns your sister and some financial irregularities that have come to my attention. My heart began racing. What kind of irregularities? 3 weeks ago, I received some disturbing information about how this wedding was funded. Are you aware that Victoria has been systematically draining your grandmother's trust fund to pay for these elaborate festivities? The world seemed to tilt on its axis. That is impossible. Grandmother's trust fund was established for her medical care. Victoria would never. Robert pulled out his phone and showed me a series of bank statements. My business partner's daughter works at the bank that manages the trust. These transfers began 6 months ago, always in amounts just below the threshold that would trigger automatic oversight. Your sister has taken nearly $200,000. I stared at the evidence, feeling sick. Grandmother Morrison had been moved to an assisted living facility last year after her dementia diagnosis. The trust fund was supposed to ensure she received the best possible care for the rest of her life. But how is this possible? Victoria does not have access to that account. According to the bank records, she obtained power of attorney 6 months ago by claiming your grandmother was no longer mentally competent to manage her finances. She then systematically transferred funds to various wedding vendors and personal accounts. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Victoria stolen from our vulnerable grandmother, but she had used that stolen money to fund her fairy tale wedding while relegating me to sit behind a pillar like some unwanted guest. Robert continued, I discovered this information while conducting due diligence on my son's future wife. In our family's business, financial integrity is paramount. I cannot allow my son to marry someone capable of elder financial abuse. What are you going to do with this information? His expression was grave. That depends on what you choose to do, Scarlett. As your grandmother's family member, you have the legal standing to challenge these transactions. But I wanted you to know the truth before I take any action that might affect your family. The next morning, I sat in my small apartment staring at the photocopies Robert had given me, trying to process the magnitude of Victoria's betrayal. The bank statements showed a clear pattern of theft that had been planned and executed with calculated precision. My phone rang constantly. Victoria calling to gush about her perfect wedding day, our parents wanting to rehash every magical moment. I let every call go to voicemail. How could I engage in normal family conversation when I now knew the dark truth behind their celebration? By Monday morning, I had made my decision. I called the bank that managed grandmother's trust fund and requested an immediate meeting with the senior account manager. Margaret Stevens, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the account activity with obvious concern. Miss Morrison, these transactions are highly irregular. The power of attorney documentation your sister provided seemed legitimate at the time, but the pattern of withdrawals is extremely troubling. What are my options for challenging these transfers? Given that you are listed as a secondary beneficiary and your grandmother's closest blood relative after your sister, you have strong legal standing. We can freeze the account immediately and begin the process of reversing the unauthorized transactions. How long will that take? Recovery of funds from wedding vendors will be complex, but we can start by freezing any remaining assets in accounts where the stolen money was deposited. I recommend you contact the Adult Protective Services immediately. This constitutes elder financial abuse, which is a serious felony. I left the bank with a thick folder of documentation and a phone number for the district attorney's office that specialized in elder abuse cases. My next stop was the assisted living facility where grandmother Morrison resided. Finding her in the common room, confused and fragile, strengthened my resolve. She recognized me sporadically due to her dementia, but her eyes lit up when I sat beside her. Scarlett, dear, when is Victoria getting married? She promised to invite me, but I cannot seem to remember. My heart broke. The wedding already happened, Grandma. It was beautiful. I could not bear to tell her that her own granddaughter had stolen her life savings to pay for that beauty. That afternoon, I called Robert Wellington to update him on my actions. His response surprised me. Scarlett, I am proud of you for taking immediate action. This could not have been easy. I want you to know that I have also begun my own investigation. As a prominent businessman, I have connections within the legal and financial community that might be helpful. I appreciate any assistance you can provide. There is something else. My business partner mentioned that Victoria has been making some questionable financial decisions beyond the trust fund theft. She apparently opened several high-limit credit cards using falsified income information and has been living far beyond her actual means. This revelation added another layer to Victoria's deception. She had not only stolen from our grandmother but had also been building a house of cards with fraudulent credit applications. Robert, why are you helping me? You barely know me. His pause was thoughtful. My own mother suffered from dementia before she passed away. The idea that someone would exploit a vulnerable elderly person for personal gain is deeply offensive to me. Additionally, I cannot allow my son to unknowingly marry a criminal. This affects my family's reputation and business interests. Over the next week, I worked with Margaret Stevens and the district attorney's office to build a comprehensive case against Victoria. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged signatures, falsified medical evaluations claiming grandmother was incompetent, and systematic fund transfers that coincided perfectly with wedding vendor payments. The turning point came when Adult Protective Services assigned investigator James Mitchell to the case. A former police detective with 20 years of experience in financial crimes, he had seen similar cases but was shocked by the brazenness of Victoria's theft. Most elder abuse cases involve small amounts taken over long periods, he explained during our meeting. Your sister stole nearly $200,000 in 6 months. This level of systematic theft requires significant planning and complete disregard for the victim's welfare. James had already begun interviewing the wedding vendors who had received payments from the trust fund. Several admitted they had found it unusual that payments came from an account bearing an elderly woman's name rather than the bride's, but they had assumed it was a family gift. We also discovered that Victoria forged your grandmother's signature on the power of attorney documents. The handwriting analysis is conclusive. She practiced your grandmother's signature multiple times before creating the legal document. The investigation revealed Victoria's elaborate scheme. She had convinced the family doctor to provide a medical evaluation stating that grandmother was no longer capable of managing her finances, but we discovered she had misrepresented grandmother's condition. The doctor had noted mild cognitive decline, not complete incompetence. Your sister essentially committed multiple felonies, James explained. Elder financial abuse, fraud, forgery, and potentially identity theft. The cumulative charges could result in 10 to 15 years in prison. As the case developed, Robert Wellington proved to be an invaluable ally. His business connections provided access to forensic accountants who uncovered additional evidence of Victoria's financial crimes. They discovered she had also been siphoning money from her employer's client escrow accounts, a revelation that would soon destroy her legal career. The most damaging evidence came from Victoria's own digital footprint. Her social media accounts showed expensive purchases, luxury vacations, and lavish lifestyle choices that far exceeded her legitimate income as a junior associate at a small law firm. The timeline of these purchases corresponded directly with the dates of theft from grandmother's trust fund. She was so confident in her scheme that she documented her crimes publicly, Robert observed while reviewing the evidence. This level of arrogance will make the prosecution's case very straightforward. By the end of the second week, we had assembled an airtight case that would not only recover grandmother's stolen funds, but would also result in serious criminal charges for Victoria. The only question remaining was when and how to confront her with the evidence. James Mitchell recommended we coordinate with the district attorney's office to ensure Victoria could be arrested simultaneously with the civil action to freeze her assets. We want to prevent her from hiding or transferring any remaining funds once she realizes she has been caught. The trap was set. Victoria's perfect wedding had been funded by stolen money, and her fairy tale life was about to become a criminal nightmare. The sister who had relegated me to sit behind a pillar was about to discover that some pillars provide excellent vantage points for planning justice. The confrontation was scheduled for a Friday morning at the district attorney's office. I had not spoken to Victoria since the wedding, despite her increasingly frustrated voicemails asking why I was avoiding her calls. She had no idea that her entire world was about to collapse. James Mitchell arranged for Victoria to be summoned under the pretense of a routine inquiry about grandmother's trust fund management. She arrived at the government building dressed in one of her expensive suits, probably purchased with stolen money, looking confident and slightly annoyed at the inconvenience. I was positioned in an adjacent room with Robert Wellington and the prosecutor watching through a one-way window as James presented Victoria with the evidence. The moment she realized the scope of the investigation, her confident facade crumbled completely. "This is obviously some kind of mistake," she insisted, her voice becoming shrill. "I have legal power of attorney over my grandmother's finances. Everything I did was completely legitimate." James placed the handwriting analysis report in front of her. "Miss Morrison, we have conclusive proof that you forged your grandmother's signature on the power of attorney documents. We also have evidence that you misrepresented her mental capacity to obtain legal control of her finances." Victoria's hands began trembling as she flipped through the evidence folder. Bank statements, vendor receipts, credit card applications with falsified income information, and social media posts showing her lavish spending habits. Everything was documented with devastating precision. "You stole nearly $200,000 from a vulnerable elderly woman with dementia," James continued. "You used that stolen money to fund your wedding and personal expenses while your grandmother's quality of care was potentially compromised." "She is my grandmother. I would never hurt her." Victoria's protestations sounded desperate and hollow. "Your actions speak louder than your words, Miss Morrison. You systematically drained her life savings for your personal benefit. That is the textbook definition of elder financial abuse." The prosecutor district attorney, Karen Walsh, entered the room at that moment. A formidable woman with a reputation for aggressive prosecution of elder abuse cases, she had personally reviewed Victoria's file and was clearly disgusted by the evidence. "Miss Morrison, you are under arrest for elder financial abuse, fraud, forgery, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent." Watching Victoria being handcuffed and read her rights provided a satisfaction I had never experienced before. The sister who had treated me like an embarrassment was finally being held accountable for her crimes. Robert Wellington placed a supportive hand on my shoulder as we watched Victoria being led away. "Justice is not always swift, but it is often thorough. Your grandmother will have her money returned, and your sister will face the consequences of her choices." The immediate aftermath was chaotic. Our parents received a call from Victoria's attorney begging them to post bail and hire expensive criminal defense lawyers. The wedding gifts had to be inventoried as potential evidence of money laundering. Marcus Wellington, faced with the reality of his new wife's criminal behavior, filed for annulment within 48 hours. The family gathering that Sunday was unlike anything in Morrison family history. Our parents, stunned and humiliated by Victoria's arrest, demanded that I explain my role in the investigation. "How could you betray your own sister?" our mother accused, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This could have been handled privately within the family." "She stole from grandmother," I replied calmly. "She committed multiple felonies and exploited a vulnerable elderly woman. This is exactly how it should be handled." Our father always, Victoria's biggest supporter, tried a different approach. "Scarlett, this will destroy our family's reputation. Victoria made some poor choices, but does she really deserve to go to prison? Can we not work something out?" The question revealed everything wrong with our family dynamic. Victoria had committed serious crimes, but our parents' primary concern was protecting their golden child from consequences rather than ensuring justice for their elderly mother. "Dad, she stole grandmother's life savings to pay for her wedding. While we were celebrating her special day, grandmother was sitting in a care facility, unaware that her own granddaughter had robbed her blind." Robert Wellington had provided me with an additional ally I had not expected. His business partner, David Chin, had daughters of his own and was outraged by Victoria's treatment of both grandmother and me at the wedding. "I have seen many family conflicts in my years as a corporate attorney," David told me during a private meeting, "but the combination of elder abuse and sibling cruelty in your case is particularly egregious. Victoria not only stole from your grandmother but went out of her way to humiliate you at her wedding, a wedding funded entirely by stolen money." David offered to connect me with a civil attorney who specialized in recovering stolen assets, ensuring that every possible penny would be returned to grandmother's care account. He also provided character references that would be helpful if the case went to trial. The media attention began 3 weeks after Victoria's arrest. Elder abuse cases involving wealthy families always attracted public interest, and the detail about the lavish wedding funded by stolen money made for compelling headlines. Local attorney arrested for stealing grandmother's life savings to fund fairy tale wedding read the front page of the Metropolitan newspaper. The accompanying article included a photograph of Victoria at her wedding wearing the expensive dress purchased with stolen funds. The professional consequences for Victoria were immediate and devastating. The State Bar Association opened an ethics investigation that would result in the permanent suspension of her legal license. Her law firm fired her within hours of the arrest, and her colleagues publicly distanced themselves from the scandal. Marcus Wellington's family released a formal statement through their attorney expressing their shock and disappointment in Victoria's criminal behavior. Robert Wellington personally ensured that their business associates understood that the Wellington family had been victims of Victoria's deception rather than complicit in her crimes. The turning point in building my support network came when grandmother's longtime caregiver, Maria Santos, reached out to me directly. She had noticed signs that grandmother's account was being drained, but had been afraid to speak up without concrete evidence. I saw the expensive gifts Victoria would bring, knowing that your grandmother was asking about her heating bill being paid, Maria told me. I suspected something was wrong, but I did not know how to prove it. Maria became a crucial witness in the prosecution's case. Her testimony about grandmother's actual mental capacity contradicted Victoria's claims that our grandmother was completely incompetent. She also provided evidence that Victoria had been lying about the level of care grandmother was receiving. Your grandmother is confused about recent events, but she remembers people and understands when someone is kind to her, Maria explained. She is not the helpless invalid that Victoria described to obtain power of attorney. The alliance network that formed around grandmother's case exceeded anything I had imagined possible. Robert Wellington leveraged his business connections to ensure the story received appropriate media coverage. David Chin provided legal expertise pro bono. Margaret Stevens from the bank went above and beyond to track down every stolen dollar. James Mitchell worked tirelessly to build the strongest possible criminal case. Even people who had barely known me before became invested in seeing justice served. The wedding vendors who had unknowingly accepted stolen money cooperated fully with the investigation, providing detailed records of Victoria's spending habits. Several offered to testify about her demanding behavior and apparent disregard for budget limitations. The most powerful ally emerged from an unexpected source. Dr. Patricia Hoffman, grandmother's physician, revealed that Victoria had pressured her to overstate grandmother's cognitive decline in the medical evaluation used to obtain power of attorney. I found Miss Victoria Morrison's insistence troubling at the time, Dr. Hoffman stated in her deposition. She seemed more interested in documenting incompetence than understanding her grandmother's actual condition. I noted mild cognitive impairment, but she demanded language suggesting complete mental incapacity. This evidence proved that Victoria had not only forged signatures, but had also attempted to manipulate medical professionals to support her fraudulent scheme. The pattern of deception was becoming undeniable, even to our parents who had initially defended her actions. As the criminal case moved toward trial, I realized that the humiliation of sitting behind a pillar at Victoria's wedding had been a blessing in disguise. That moment of isolation had positioned me to meet Robert Wellington, whose intervention had exposed Victoria's crimes and led to justice for grandmother. The sister who had treated me like an embarrassing secret had created the perfect circumstances for her own downfall. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone's true character reveal itself to the world. Just as victory seemed assured, my carefully constructed alliance began to crumble in the most devastating way possible. 3 weeks before Victoria's trial was scheduled to begin, I received an urgent call from James Mitchell that changed everything. "Scarlett, we need to meet immediately. There has been a significant development in your sister's case, and it is not good news." I rushed to his office, my mind racing through possibilities. Had Victoria somehow destroyed evidence? Had she fled the country? Nothing could have prepared me for what James revealed when I arrived. Yesterday evening, I received a call from the district attorney's office. Someone has been feeding information about our investigation directly to Victoria's defense team. They know about every piece of evidence we have collected, every witness we plan to call, and every strategy we have developed. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. How is that possible? Who would have access to that information? James's expression was grim. The leak is coming from someone within our core group. Someone we trusted completely has been working against us from the beginning. My thoughts immediately went to the obvious suspects. Perhaps someone at the bank had been compromised, or maybe one of the wedding vendors had been intimidated into cooperation. But James's next revelation shattered those assumptions. Scarlett, I am sorry to tell you this, but the source of the leak is David Chin. The words did not compute initially. David Chin had been one of our strongest supporters, providing legal expertise and connecting us with additional resources. He had expressed genuine outrage at Victoria's crimes and had seemed personally invested in seeing justice served. That cannot be right. David has been helping us build the case. Why would he sabotage his own work? James pulled out a thick folder filled with phone records and financial documents. We discovered that David has been receiving substantial payments from an account controlled by Victoria's defense attorney. The payments began 2 weeks after he first offered to help you. I stared at the evidence, feeling the familiar sensation of my world tilting off its axis. The bank statements showed regular transfers of $5,000 to David's personal account, always within 24 hours of our strategic planning meetings. Victoria's family hired him to infiltrate our investigation from the beginning. James continued. His law firm has been representing the Morrison family's business interests for years. When Victoria was arrested, they activated David as a double agent to protect their investment in your family's reputation. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Every conversation I had shared with David about our evidence, every witness statement he had reviewed, every strategic decision he had influenced, all of it had been reported directly to Victoria's defense team. How much damage has been done to our case? James's pause was telling. Substantial. Victoria's lawyers have had time to prepare counter-arguments for every piece of evidence we collected. They have contacted our witnesses and potentially intimidated or bribed them. Most critically, they know about the handwriting analysis and have hired their own expert to challenge our findings. The immediate impact became clear over the next 48 hours. 3 of our key witnesses suddenly became unavailable to testify, citing scheduling conflicts or family emergencies. The wedding photographer who had documented Victoria's lavish spending mysteriously lost the digital files that showed the timeline of purchases. The bank employee who had first noticed the suspicious transactions was transferred to a different department and could no longer access the relevant records. Most devastatingly, Dr. Patricia Hoffman called to inform us that she was withdrawing her testimony about Victoria's manipulation of the medical evaluation. Someone had threatened to file a malpractice lawsuit against her if she continued to cooperate with the prosecution. I am sorry, Scarlett, but I cannot risk my medical practice over this case. I have patients depending on me, and I cannot afford the legal battles your sister's team is threatening. Victoria's defense strategy became clear during a preliminary hearing that week. Instead of denying the theft, they were arguing that she had acted with good intentions to protect grandmother from making poor financial decisions. They claimed that Victoria had been planning to return the money after the wedding and that her actions constituted family financial management rather than criminal theft. David's inside information had allowed them to craft responses to our strongest evidence. When we presented the forged signatures, they had expert testimony suggesting the signatures could have been legitimate. When we showed the pattern of systematic theft, they argued it demonstrated careful financial planning rather than criminal intent. The judge, clearly influenced by the defense's well-prepared arguments, agreed to delay the trial by 6 months to allow both sides to present additional evidence. This delay was exactly what Victoria's team wanted: more time to discredit witnesses and create reasonable doubt about her criminal intent. Robert Wellington called an emergency meeting with me and James to assess the damage to our case. His business acumen provided a stark evaluation of our position. David's betrayal has compromised our entire strategy. Victoria's defense team now knows everything we planned to present, and they have had time to develop counter-arguments for every piece of evidence. We are essentially starting over, but with the disadvantage that they know all of our previous moves. The psychological impact of David's betrayal was almost worse than the legal setback. I had trusted him completely, sharing details about my family relationships and personal motivations that I had never discussed with anyone else. Learning that he had been manipulating that trust for money felt like a violation that went beyond professional disappointment. How did I not see this coming? I asked Robert during a private conversation after the meeting. David seemed so genuine in his support for grandmother's case. Scarlett's sophisticated manipulation is designed to be invisible. David is a skilled attorney who understood exactly how to present himself as a trustworthy ally. His betrayal says nothing about your judgment and everything about his character. The Morrison family dynamics shifted dramatically once news of David's betrayal became public. Our parents, who had been gradually accepting Victoria's guilt as the evidence mounted, suddenly found new hope that their golden child might escape serious consequences. Maybe this whole case was built on false evidence, our mother suggested during a tense family dinner. If David found problems with the prosecution's case, perhaps Victoria was not as guilty as it seemed. Our father went further, suggesting that I had been manipulated by Robert Wellington for his own business purposes. Scarlett, maybe you should consider that the Wellington family wants to destroy Victoria to protect their own reputation. Have you thought about whose interests you are really serving? The family pressure to drop the case intensified as Victoria's defense team gained confidence. They reached out through intermediaries, suggesting that we could resolve everything privately if I agreed to withdraw my cooperation with the prosecution. Your sister has learned from her mistakes, the message conveyed through a family friend stated. She is willing to return the money and ensure your grandmother receives excellent care. Is destroying her life really worth pursuing criminal charges? For the first time since the investigation began, I found myself questioning whether I had the strength to continue fighting. David's betrayal had not only damaged our legal case, but had also shattered my confidence in my ability to judge people's true motivations. The lowest point came when I visited grandmother at the assisted living facility and found Victoria there playing the role of devoted granddaughter for the staff and other residents. She was feeding grandmother lunch and speaking to her in gentle, caring tones that seemed completely sincere. Scarlett. Victoria called out when she saw me, her voice bright and welcoming. Come join us. I was just telling Grandma about how much I missed her at the wedding reception. The manipulation was breathtaking. Victoria was creating a public narrative of family devotion while her legal team worked to discredit the evidence of her theft. She was positioning herself as the loving granddaughter being persecuted by a vindictive sister and overzealous prosecutors. That night, I seriously considered withdrawing from the case entirely. David's betrayal had shown me how naive I had been about people's motivations, and the family pressure was becoming unbearable. Maybe it would be easier to accept a private settlement and try to move on with my life. But then I remembered sitting behind that pillar at Victoria's wedding, watching her celebrate her fairy tale moment that had been funded entirely by stolen money from a vulnerable elderly woman. The image of grandmother's confused face when she asked about heating bills while Victoria flaunted expensive jewelry strengthened my resolve. David Chin had betrayed our cause for money, but that did not make Victoria any less guilty of her crimes. The challenge now was rebuilding our case with people who could be trusted completely and finding new evidence that David had not been able to compromise. The war was far from over, but I had learned valuable lessons about the difference between true allies and sophisticated manipulators. Victoria's moment of triumph would be short-lived once we regrouped and struck back with evidence she never saw coming. The breakthrough that saved our case came from the most unexpected source, Victoria herself. Her overconfidence following David's sabotage led her to make a critical mistake that would ultimately seal her fate. 2 weeks after the preliminary hearing, I received a call from Maria Santos' grandmother's caregiver with information that changed everything. Maria's English was sometimes limited, but her message was crystal clear. Miss Scarlett, you need to come quickly. Your sister was here yesterday and she said something very bad. I recorded it on my phone because I knew it was important. I rushed to the assisted living facility where Maria played me an audio recording that made my blood run cold. Victoria's voice was clear and unmistakably arrogant as she spoke to someone on the phone while she thought Maria was out of earshot. "The charges will be dropped within a month," Victoria was saying. "David has given us everything we need to destroy their case. That pathetic sister of mine has no idea how thoroughly we have outmaneuvered her. Once this is over, I will make sure she never interferes in family business again." The recording continued with even more damaging statements. "Grandmother will never remember any of this anyway. The money was just sitting there, and I put it to better use than rotting in some bank account. At least I created something beautiful with it instead of wasting it on overpriced medical care for someone who does not even know what day it is." Maria had captured over 10 minutes of Victoria's phone conversation, including her admission that she had intentionally manipulated the power of attorney documents and had never intended to return the stolen funds. Most damaging of all, Victoria explicitly described her grandmother as a confused old woman who was an easy target. "Maria, this recording could change everything. Are you willing to testify about when and where you captured this conversation?" Her response was immediate and fierce. "Miss Scarlett, I take care of many elderly people in my career. What your sister did is evil. I will testify anywhere, anytime to make sure she pays for hurting your grandmother." I contacted James Mitchell immediately, and within hours we had a strategy for introducing this new evidence. Victoria's own words contradicted every argument her defense team had been making about her good intentions and family financial management. But our legal team needed to be rebuilt from scratch since David's betrayal had compromised our previous approach. This time, we would work with a smaller, more secure group of people whose loyalty could not be questioned. Robert Wellington recommended a prosecutor from the state attorney general's office who specialized in complex financial crimes. Sandra Rodriguez had 20 years of experience in elder abuse cases and a reputation for aggressive prosecution that made defense attorneys nervous. "Miss Morrison, this recording is exactly what we need to overcome the damage caused by the information leak," Sandra explained during our first meeting. "Your sister's own words prove criminal intent and complete disregard for your grandmother's welfare. No jury will be able to ignore this evidence." Sandra brought her own team of investigators who were completely separate from the local district attorney's office, where David had been feeding information to Victoria's defense team. This fresh perspective revealed evidence that our previous investigation had missed. The most significant discovery came when Sandra's team subpoenaed Victoria's complete digital communications history. They found text message conversations between Victoria and several wedding vendors where she explicitly discussed using family money to pay for upgrades and additions to her wedding plans. "Look at this message thread with the florist," Sandra showed me during a case review meeting. Victoria writes, "Use the premium flowers for everything. Grandma's account can handle the extra expense and she will never know the difference anyway." The text messages created a timeline of premeditated theft that destroyed any remaining argument about Victoria's good intentions. She had not acted impulsively or made poor decisions in a moment of financial stress. She had systematically planned to steal from grandmother to fund her elaborate wedding. Sandra's investigation also uncovered Victoria's communication with David Chin, proving that their families had coordinated the sabotage of our case from the beginning. These messages would result in separate criminal charges against David for obstruction of justice and conspiracy. But our strongest new ally emerged from within Victoria's own professional circle. Jennifer Walsh, a paralegal at Victoria's former law firm, contacted Sandra directly with information about Victoria's workplace behavior that corroborated our case. Victoria bragged constantly about her expensive lifestyle and upcoming wedding, Jennifer stated in her deposition. When other employees asked how she could afford such luxury on her salary, she would joke about family financial planning and taking care of money that would otherwise be wasted. Jennifer provided copies of office emails where Victoria had discussed her grandmother's trust fund with colleagues, treating the theft as a clever financial strategy rather than elder abuse. These communications showed that Victoria had never hidden her actions within her professional circle. She had simply assumed no one would challenge her or report her crimes. The most devastating evidence came when Jennifer revealed that Victoria had used the law firm's resources to research power of attorney laws and elder financial management, The firm's computer logs showed that Victoria had spent hours studying how to obtain legal control over elderly relatives' finances, proving that her theft had been thoroughly planned and researched. She used her legal training and professional resources to commit these crimes more effectively, Sandra explained to me. This evidence transforms the case from family financial mismanagement to sophisticated criminal enterprise. Sandra's team also discovered that Victoria had been lying about her employment status during the power of attorney application process. She had claimed to earn significantly more than her actual salary and had provided falsified tax returns to support her claims of financial responsibility. Your sister created an entirely fictional financial profile to convince the bank that she was qualified to manage your grandmother's assets, Sandra revealed. Every document she submitted contained material misrepresentations about her income assets and financial experience. The reconstruction of our case took 6 weeks, but the new evidence was far more compelling than anything we had assembled previously. Victoria's own words, combined with her digital communications and professional research into elder abuse tactics, created an unassailable prosecution case. Robert Wellington's business connections proved valuable once again when he introduced me to Margaret Thompson, a forensic accountant who specialized in tracking stolen assets. Margaret had worked on several high-profile embezzlement cases and was expert at following money trails through complex financial transactions. Your sister was remarkably sloppy about documenting her spending, Margaret observed while reviewing Victoria's financial records. She kept receipts and bank statements that clearly show the stolen money being used for personal expenses. Most criminals try to obscure the connection between theft and spending, but Victoria seemed to view the money as legitimately hers. Margaret's analysis revealed that Victoria had stolen even more than we initially realized. The wedding expenses were only part of her theft. She had also used grandmother's money to pay off personal credit card debt, make a down payment on a new car, and fund a European honeymoon that Marcus Wellington had been told was a wedding gift from his parents. The total theft exceeds $300,000 when you include all the personal expenses she charged to your grandmother's accounts, Margaret reported. This level of systematic theft indicates someone who viewed their victim as a personal bank account. The evidence was now so overwhelming that Victoria's defense team began reaching out about plea negotiations. They knew that the new evidence made a trial conviction virtually certain, and they wanted to minimize Victoria's prison sentence through cooperation and restitution. Sandra refused to consider any plea arrangement that did not include significant prison time. Elder abuse of this magnitude requires serious consequences. Your sister exploited a vulnerable elderly person for hundreds of thousands of dollars while showing complete contempt for her victim's welfare. She will serve substantial prison time regardless of any plea agreement. The psychological impact of our comeback was immediate and satisfying. Victoria's confident social media posts stopped abruptly once she realized the scope of the new evidence against her. Her family's pressure on me to drop the case transformed into desperate pleas for mercy and forgiveness. Most importantly, grandmother's trust fund was completely restored through asset seizure and recovery actions. Margaret Thompson had tracked down every stolen dollar and ensured that grandmother's medical care would never again be compromised by Victoria's greed. The sister who had made me sit behind a pillar was about to discover that some columns are strong enough to support entire buildings, including the architecture of justice that was about to collapse on her criminal enterprise. The trial that finally took place 8 months after Victoria's arrest was unlike anything our family had ever experienced. The courthouse was packed with media representatives, legal professionals studying the case for educational purposes, and community members who had followed the story of Victoria's elaborate theft scheme. Sandra Rodriguez opened the prosecution's case with Victoria's own recorded words, admitting to the theft and expressing contempt for grandmother's vulnerability. The audio recording Maria had captured played throughout the silent courtroom, Victoria's arrogant voice declaring that grandmother was an easy target whose money was better spent on a wedding than medical care. The defense team, now working without inside information from David Chin, struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence. Their initial strategy of claiming good intentions collapsed immediately when confronted with Victoria's text messages planning the theft and her research into power of attorney manipulation tactics. Victoria herself made the critical error of taking the witness stand in her own defense. Under Sandra's skillful cross-examination, she revealed the full scope of her selfishness and lack of remorse for exploiting our grandmother. Miss Morrison, do you believe your grandmother deserved to have her life savings stolen to pay for your wedding? I was not stealing. I was managing family assets more effectively than they would have been managed otherwise. So you believed you had the right to decide how your grandmother's money should be spent, regardless of her wishes or needs. Someone had to make responsible financial decisions. Grandmother was not capable of understanding complex financial management. Set. Victoria's testimony revealed her complete inability to accept responsibility for her crimes. Even when confronted with evidence of her grandmother's actual mental capacity and the devastating impact of the theft on her medical care, Victoria maintained that her actions had been justified family financial planning. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges: elder financial abuse, fraud, forgery, identity theft, and money laundering. The speed of their decision reflected the overwhelming nature of the evidence and their disgust with Victoria's lack of remorse. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to our family despite the shared surname, delivered a sentence that exceeded even Sandra's expectations. Victoria received 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 8 years. Additionally, she was ordered to pay complete restitution plus penalties totaling $450,000. Miss Morrison, your crimes represent a profound betrayal of family trust and a callous exploitation of one of society's most vulnerable populations. Judge Morrison stated during sentencing, "You used your legal education and professional skills to commit sophisticated financial crimes against your own grandmother, showing complete disregard for her welfare and dignity." The judge continued with observations that perfectly captured Victoria's character. Your testimony revealed an individual who believes rules and ethical obligations apply to other people but not to herself. You have shown no genuine remorse for your actions and no understanding of the harm you caused to your victim. The immediate consequences for Victoria extended far beyond her criminal sentence. The State Bar Association permanently revoked her legal license, ensuring she could never again use her professional training to exploit others. The law firm that had employed her faced significant sanctions for failing to prevent her use of company resources to research elder abuse tactics. Marcus Wellington's annulment was finalized the same week as Victoria's sentencing, officially ending their marriage and severing any connection between the Wellington family and Victoria's criminal behavior. Robert Wellington released a public statement expressing satisfaction that justice had been served and reaffirming his family's commitment to supporting elder abuse prevention efforts. David Chin faced his own legal consequences for his role in sabotaging our case. He was convicted of obstruction of justice and conspiracy, receiving a 3-year sentence and permanent disbarment. His law firm dissolved under the scandal, and several of his former clients filed malpractice suits alleging ethical violations in their cases. The restoration of grandmother's finances allowed us to significantly improve her care situation. We transferred her to a premier assisted living facility that specialized in dementia care, ensuring she would receive the best possible treatment for the remainder of her life. The stolen money was not only recovered, but earned substantial damages that provided financial security far beyond her original trust fund. But the most meaningful change was the transformation in my own life and relationships. Robert Wellington had become more than an ally in our legal battle. He had evolved into a genuine father figure who provided the support and encouragement that had been missing from my relationship with my biological parents. Scarlett, your courage in pursuing this case despite family pressure and David's betrayal demonstrates extraordinary character. Robert told me during a celebration dinner after Victoria's sentencing, "I hope you will consider me part of your chosen family from now on." Maria Santos, grandmother's caregiver, became another cherished relationship born from our shared commitment to protecting vulnerable elderly people. She introduced me to a network of caregivers and social workers who were fighting similar battles against elder abuse throughout our community. Jennifer Walsh, the paralegal who had provided crucial evidence against Victoria, became a close friend and professional ally. Together, we established a nonprofit organization focused on educating families about elder financial abuse prevention and supporting victims of similar crimes. Your case has inspired changes in how banks monitor trust fund management and how medical professionals evaluate power of attorney requests, Jennifer explained during one of our organizational meetings. Victoria's crimes have led to systematic improvements that will protect other elderly people from similar exploitation. The media attention surrounding Victoria's case created opportunities for me to speak publicly about elder abuse prevention and the importance of challenging family members who exploit vulnerable relatives. My story resonated with audiences across the country who had experienced similar family dynamics but had been afraid to take action. Most importantly, my relationship with grandmother deepened during her final years. Though her dementia progressed, she retained enough awareness to recognize my consistent presence and care. In her lucid moments, she would hold my hand and express gratitude for the love and protection I had provided. "Scarlett is my good granddaughter," she would tell her caregivers. "She takes care of me when others cannot." Those words meant more to me than any legal victory or public recognition. I had not only recovered her stolen money, but had also ensured that her remaining years would be filled with dignity, comfort, and genuine family love. The Morrison family dynamics never recovered from Victoria's betrayal and imprisonment. Our parents, finally forced to confront the reality of their golden child's criminal behavior, struggled with guilt and embarrassment that affected their health and social relationships. They eventually moved to another state, unable to face the ongoing community discussions about Victoria's crimes. 2 years after Victoria's sentencing, I received an unexpected letter from her in prison. The tone was dramatically different from the arrogant woman who had once made me sit behind a pillar at her stolen money wedding. "Scarlett, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I finally understand the magnitude of what I did to grandmother and to our family. Prison has given me time to reflect on the person I became and the pain I caused to people who deserved my love and protection instead of my exploitation." The letter continued with what seemed like genuine remorse. "I particularly regret how I treated you throughout our lives, but especially at my wedding. Making you sit behind that pillar while I celebrated with money stolen from our grandmother represents everything wrong with my character and values. You deserved to be honored as my sister, not hidden like an embarrassment." I never responded to Victoria's letter, but I kept it as a reminder that justice served not only protects victims, but sometimes creates opportunities for genuine accountability and growth in perpetrators. 5 years after the trial, grandmother passed away peacefully in her care facility, surrounded by people who genuinely loved her. Her funeral was attended by dozens of caregivers, social workers, and community members whose lives had been touched by her story and our fight for justice. Robert Wellington delivered one of the eulogies speaking about grandmother's dignity and the importance of protecting elderly people from exploitation. Margaret Morrison's legacy is not defined by the crimes committed against her, but by the justice that was achieved and the systemic changes that resulted from her granddaughter's courage. Standing at grandmother's graveside, surrounded by my chosen family of people who had supported our fight for justice, I reflected on how much my life had changed since that humiliating night behind the pillar. Victoria's attempt to make me invisible had actually positioned me to see her crimes clearly and take action that protected countless other elderly people. The sister who had treated me like an embarrassing secret was now serving the 8th year of her prison sentence, while I had built a life filled with meaningful relationships and purposeful work. Sometimes the best revenge truly is living well and ensuring that justice prevails over family loyalty when crimes demand accountability. As I think about this incredible journey from that wedding night humiliation to seeing justice fully served, I want to ask all of you watching, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what was right? Have you witnessed elder abuse in your own family but stayed silent to avoid conflict? My experience taught me that protecting vulnerable people always takes priority over protecting family reputations. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have had the courage to challenge your own sister when everyone else was pressuring you to stay quiet? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I love hearing your perspectives on these complex family situations. If this story resonated with you and you believe in standing up for justice even when it is difficult, please smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about karma, family drama, and justice being served. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that doing the right thing is always worth it, even when the consequences seem overwhelming at first. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most challenging but ultimately rewarding experiences of my life. Remember that chosen family built on mutual respect and genuine care is often stronger than blood relations built on obligation and manipulation. Until next time, keep fighting for what is right and never let anyone make you feel invisible again.